200 immigrant and refugee rights groups throughout New York. New York Immigration Coalition serves one of the largest and most diverse newcomer populations in the United States. The multiracial and multi-sector NYIC membership base includes grassroots and nonprofit community organizations, religious and academic institutions, labor unions, as well as legal and socioeconomic justice organizations. The NYC not only establishes a forum for immigrant groups to voice their concerns, but also provides a platform for collective action to drive positive social change. And last but not least, the division of the New York State Division of Consumer Protection, or DCP, provides free resources and education materials to consumers on a variety of different consumer protection topics, as well as voluntary mediation services between consumers and businesses. DCP works to help you become a safer and more educated consumer. The bios of our wonderful presenters were featured in the registration page. So, today's webinar, we are going to touch on what is immigration fraud and unauthorized practice of law in New York State. We'll also touch on the process and challenges of reporting, investigating, and prosecuting immigration fraud, as well as how to apply tips to prevent someone from becoming a victim of an immigration scam. So before we get started with our fabulous webinar, I need to give some housekeeping reminders. Please write your questions in the chat function. We will have time for Q&A at the end of the presentation, but as you have questions, do feel free to type them out in the chat. As Brian mentioned at the beginning, this meeting is being recorded, and the slides and recording link will be shared after the presentation. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Liz, the Director of Hotline Services, Training and Policy Development in the Division of Immigrant and Refugee Services with Catholic Charities Community Services. Joining her is Dianaba, the Team Coordinator for the Office for New Americans Hotline. The floor is now yours.
Thanks, Hattie, for that introduction. And Jenny and Brian, it's been so nice working with you both on this. And so I'm excited to be here today and really encouraged that so many of you are interested in learning more about what we do on the ONA hotline in respect to fraud, and also hoping to work more towards greater transparency around these procedures, and something we've been working very hard at the ONA hotline to create more awareness, in addition, and building on the work that's been going on and supported by the Office of New Americans and a task force, Protecting Immigrant New Yorkers task force, that we are a part of. So I'm just going to test the slides here. Great. Okay, so I know there's a few speakers today, and so we'll just sort of summarize the things that we are going to talk about, Jenaba and myself. And so for our portion of the presentation, we're going to explain the role of the ONA hotline in fighting fraud. We're going to define fraud and review some of the common and newer fraud scams that we're seeing in the immigration space. We're also going to discuss factors contributing to the prevalence of immigration scams, and also the laws and regulations that are often used to address it. And finally, we're going to share some warning signs and tips and steps that all the folks here today can take to help prevent people from being defrauded, because that's really you will see the best protection and remedy is prevention. And so moving forward, then I'm going to give you a bit of context and some background. So ONA has been operating an information and referral hotline on behalf of New York State for a very long time, with support from our partners at the Office of New Americans. And the hotline, for those of you who aren't as familiar with it, is anonymous and confidential. So it is a safe space for people to call in and get some very, very general answers to immigration. It is not staffed by lawyers, but counselors that are trained in immigration. They take trainings through actually New York Immigration Coalition. And also shout out to my colleague Barbara. And each month we help thousands of people that call all across the state and sometimes even outside of the state to connect to resources that are available on a wide variety of immigration matters. So that can include someone who's starting a business or seeking a driver's license through the green light law, or so many different places, in addition to referrals for immigration assistance through a lot of different programs that are funded across the state. And so in 2014, I believe, this is before I started here, I've been with the hotline for about 3 years now, the ONA began promoting a program that enabled community members to report consultant fraud. And as an immigration lawyer who's been doing this work for what I like to say is more than 10 years and less than 20, I have seen certain patterns in fraud since the beginning of my practice. And so it was really, having been out and doing work in communities across the city, I certainly saw so many people that sort of lost their chance to pursue immigration remedies. And so we really tried to deepen this work in the last few years and build on the history of the work that's been happening here for a decade. In our work, we train the counselors to support callers who are worried that something might be a scam. And so I'm going to share some statistics with you shortly, but just so you have an understanding, people sometimes call in before they're defrauded. They're like, oh, someone said if I gave them this, some money, they could help me do this. And so we play a role in prevention by explaining if something doesn't sound like a good option. We also support people that have been defrauded. And what we do is we collect information needed to submit a complaint that my colleague Jennifer will explain in more detail. And then we submit that to law enforcement as appropriate. And we're going to get into the details of what that looks like. Our staff also collaborates with stakeholders in the state who are interested and invested in working towards combating fraud through the Piney Task Force that I mentioned. And so that has been resumed, and the efforts to both do public education as well as, create resources and information sharing about the types of fraud that are being perpetrated against immigrants in our communities. And so when we saw recently an uptick in fraud at the beginning, I would say, of 2024, we were remotivated to kind of deepen our work in this area. And that culminated in a phone bank that we held last summer with our partners that also included the Kings County DA's office. They have an immigrant affairs unit, and special counsel David Setnerine joined us, and some of his team, as well as folks from ONA, the mayor's office, and some media partners that also promoted the event and did community education. And so because we started seeing a change in the type of scams reported, we wanted to hold this event to promote awareness, to share information about scams, explain the process when reporting fraud, and provide tips for folks so they can avoid being defrauded, and help people file the complaints if they have been scammed. And so just in that night alone, over the course of 2 hours, we assisted 58 people that called in, of the 113 that called in. And over the course of a year, we normally help 56 people file reports. So it was really important to see sort of how that increased awareness really had created an opportunity for people to call and ask questions. Thank you for the accolades there, Jenny. That's nice. So, you know, we felt really proud of that. I think it had doubled at least from the year prior, the amount of people that were willing to come forward and report fraud. And so we're really grateful for this opportunity to share more information about that process so that all of you can be informed about what that looks like and why we're sort of well suited to help people through navigate this process if they have unfortunately been cheated out of their money and their opportunities in many cases. One of the things that I've been thinking a lot about in this role is my understanding of why so many people are defrauded. And we see that there is a lot of confusion, and we are trying to create more clarity. We think there's a lot of people who are confused about what fraud looks like. So, you know, we've certainly had calls where people call in and they're like, my neighbor is in a fake marriage. And we're like, we're not here to help with the drama. That is not what we're talking about here. So some people call us thinking that this is a place to report fraud. And so we have to explain that's not what this is about. And we do need to clarify that we are dealing with immigration services fraud here. So I know some of you had questions about this. And so this is very much focused on fraud perpetrated against the immigrant community by scammers, where that might be a whole bunch of different people. And we wonder, why is this still going on? And I've seen it over the course of, you know, decades now. And that really comes out of a complexity of immigration law, long wait times, lots of changes to regulations and procedures and policies that lead to more opportunities for people to take advantage of those lapses, a shortage of attorneys that can help. Sometimes at different periods of times when you have influxes that are higher and everyone's sort of scrambling to get, you know, there's urgency sometimes. And so those are all opportunities for people to take advantage. A lot of confusion about who can and should help. How do you vet private attorneys? It's really confusing to know who is and who is not authorized. So I know our colleagues are going to be able to speak to that a little bit more. There are accredited reps, but can they help in every situations, or even situations where free help can hurt? I mean, and so, you know, we want to really address the fear about sharing information with law enforcement, and we offer people an opportunity to submit a claim without revealing their personal information, so we can submit the claim on their behalf. And also explain the process so they understand what happens when you report fraud and what agency may be best suited for you to report fraud when maybe you are a little concerned about your own immigration status. And so there might be ways to report it locally to an office versus a federal agency may be helpful in some cases. And I think also there's a fear of retaliation. We've heard from folks who are afraid to come forward because they think the scammer is going to threaten them. We know that there are consequences sometimes when people who've been helped by someone who's unscrupulous, maybe everyone that got a green card through that person is going to be affected. And that's a legitimate concern, especially in this moment in time more than ever. I think people also maybe need to understand that, you know, reporting to certain jurisdictions might be different depending on whether the fraud took place outside of New York State, what borough it took place in. But also sometimes there are limited resources for law enforcement. There's like one person maybe in an office who is investigating all of the things related to immigration, including like U visa certifications, as well as this. And some agencies may require more than one person to come forward before they can move forward on an investigation. At the end of the day, people still need help regulating their status or filing for immigration relief, and restitution may be years off, if ever. So, Geneva, did you want to talk about what happens when someone calls in?
Sure. Thank you, Liz. So I'm just going to talk about what happens when someone calls in and tries to report fraud. We do take fraud complaints from people who are unwilling to make themselves known to the law enforcement And what happened is that we do have our staff who answer the calls daily and who are trained to understand the various ways people can be defrauded and take the following step to just make sure that the complaint is accurately gathered. First, what we will need to do is to assure all callers that their conversation is confidential. Of course, that's the key step that we've been doing daily, not just for fraud-related issues, but also, as Liz mentioned, we run a hotline that is anonymous, and we want to make sure that callers know that whatever information they share with us is confidential. So, and it's important for us to be able to move forward, because one of the challenges we've been seeing in making people coming forward to report fraud is that a lot of them were scared of the repercussion, what's going to happen. And sometimes they don't even know what agency they're calling. They might think we work for the government, or maybe their information will be out there for the government to see. So we want to make sure to let them know where they're calling and that we won't share any of their information. And what else we do is that we make sure we listen to cues. Sometimes it's not obvious that this person is calling for fraud. And they might be calling for something else. They might be calling because they just need a lawyer to help them with their immigration case. And by conversing with them, we might find out some cues. Let's say a person is saying that, oh, I'm looking for a lawyer because the one that I had before took all my papers, and I'm not hearing from him anymore, right? Or I got a call from someone said that they are a USCIS officer and they helped me with filing for a work permit right there. They told me that I was approved, but I haven't heard back from them. So those are signs that we detect, knowing that, this is something that is a little bit fishy, because we all know that a work permit cannot be just approved on the spot right there over the phone. So we ask several other questions, follow-up questions, to better understand that this person might be a victim of fraud. That is, if they did not, some of them might just call and say, I'm calling because I was given your number, I'm a victim of fraud and I want to report it. That's more like straightforward, but sometimes by conversing, we get to know that this person is a potential victim. And we gather some information, ask follow-up questions, clarifying, make sure that, we understand that this is a potential fraud. And from there, we start asking questions, and we do have like a standardized script that our agent follow to ask questions. And again, we want to reassure the caller that we're asking all these questions because we want to determine that if they need to file a complaint. It's very important in order to make the caller at ease to share more information with us, because sometimes most of them might be reluctant. Even if they agree to file the fraud, they might be not sharing all the information or just giving us half the story. That is not sometimes helpful. And after taking the complaint, we do explain the process of what Catholic Charity would do once we collect their information that we will talk about on the latest. Next, we discuss with them about whether the person wants to share their information and their contact information. It's important because we let them know that if we collect their information and find out that this is a potential fraud, we would take their information and forward it to the law enforcement authorities. It could be the AG office, district attorney offices or so. And we want to make sure that they agree to that their phone number or name could be displayed to the district attorney office. Sometimes they do agree. Most of the time, they don't have issue. Once we explain that this is confidential, their information won't be shared with any other government entity. And if they are reluctant, they do not want to share their information, we always also make sure that we tell them that this can be definitely anonymous and we wouldn't share any of their personal information, that we would just file the complaint on their behalf. And sometimes we do have a team coordinator that will reach back to the caller to make sure that all information gathered are accurate, or we might have follow-up questions to determine what happened. In order to submit the complaint, we want to make sure that we took all the information that are necessary for the DA offices or whatever entity that we're sharing the fraud with, they have the necessary information. And it's important to know who are the parties involved, meaning who is the complainant, who is the potential scammer, right? Sometimes people calling because they want to report the person is a lawyer. Maybe it's a licensed lawyer, it's a notarial, it's someone who has a travel agency preparing taxes, and just assure them that they can help them with filing for their immigration paperwork. So we want to make sure that we know who are the parties involved and who is defrauded. Sometimes the complainant do not want to come forward and they have their lawyer or their neighbor or relative who's calling on their behalf. And regarding the company, we want to know if there is only one person involved. We have seen in several cases that the person could be like a lawyer who has their own office, or sometimes it's people that are working on behalf of another lawyer, or just like a group of people that are serving as notarios, or so trying to make sure helping people do their immigration paperwork. So we want to document all of that if it's a person, a group of people, business that they are complaining about. And we also ask them if they entered into an agreement, meaning if they have signed a contract. That is also a key for the element that the district attorneys want to know. If this person has signed a contract, what did they sign for? What did they agree for in terms of paying for the services, or what the lawyer has promised to do for them. Sometimes the lawyer might agree to just help them filling out their paperwork, like as a limited scope, meaning that they would just help them fill out a specific immigration relief, and it would stop just right there. They wouldn't agree to represent them at court. And when the case is denied, that's when the problems start, because then they were thinking that the person will go with them to the court, and usually it's not the case. We also asked them if there was a contract, if they signed any other document, and if they were provided with copies. So that would help knowing what did they apply for and what did they agree for. Next, we do ask them when and where, meaning when did they meet for the first time? We want to know the borough, the location. It helps us to further know where to submit this complaint and how many times they meet. Did they meet one time? We have seen people meeting in several other boroughs. Today's Brooklyn, next time, we met at the Starbucks in Brooklyn, and the lawyer or notarial might not have like a fixed office, and it makes us determine where to submit this complaint. And we also asked them question about what was promised, like when the work was supposed to be done, did they give them any deadline? And as I said before, usually it's just on the spot. They might make them feel like the work permit will be just granted like in a week or in a day or so. And the how here is important because we want to know how did they meet, right? So we have seen an uptick of people seeing ads on Facebook or other social media platform like WhatsApp or so. And it's because a neighbor or a friend had made them aware that this person is helping with immigration or so. And we want to know how they find out about that scammer, and also how much they agree to pay. That's important, knowing how much they pay, how did they pay. Some of them, like right now, use a lot of payment like through Zelle, through Venmo or so to make the payment. And most importantly, we want to know how did they find out that this was a fraud. Some of them, they make payments, and the moment you made the payment, you won't hear from the person anymore. They would have to reach out, call back many times, and the number appeared to be disconnected or so. That's why we're asking this question to make sure that this is the case. And also what was done. If the person is trying to apply for asylum, for example, we want to know if an asylum application was submitted, if they receive any copy, to just make sure that there was an asylum that was filed with either USCIS or the court. Okay, so after we do all of that, we wanna, now the next step we will do is to make sure that where do we submit the complaint and why. It's important once we gather all this information, the goal is to make sure that we submit the complaint to the right law enforcement office that would make sure that, you know, they would either investigate, or maybe they have other people who complained before for the same person that would trigger an investigation or so. And we look at several factors for that. We have worked with the Special Counsel for Immigrant Affairs at the Brooklyn DA office, and that would make us and our staff better understand what is involved in prosecuting a scam. So the District Attorney Office obtained jurisdiction for over case if the victim either reside in that county. It could be that the person who called us lives in Brooklyn, Bronx, Westchester County, or where the fraudulent transaction happened, meaning maybe they met in the Bronx and the person paid cash in the Bronx, or they did a Western Union to a person who lived in the Bronx or in Albany. So we want to determine which one of these happened, either way, to be able to know where to submit the complaint. Sometimes they don't know because they just talk over the phone. They did the transaction via Zelle or Venmo, so they're not sure when did that happen or so. And if that is the case, we make sure that we send the complaint to both DA offices. It could be that the person lives in Brooklyn, but the scammer lives in Westchester. That's where they registered their office at. So we will send the complaint to both Brooklyn DA office and Westchester County office, and we will let them take it from there. Usually they kind of discuss and see who can take over the case. And what else we do is that we do upload the complaint to the FTC database, that is the Federal Trade Commission. And we do that especially when the scam involves wire transfer or out-of-state actor. This is really, we have seen an uptick of this type of complaint because a lot of complaints we're getting now are because people are here in New York, but find out there is an office in Florida, in California, in Washington, that is helping people file for asylum online, right? So, and they don't have sometimes much information about it. It's just like a phone call that they received, or they just talk to them via WhatsApp video or so. And we use our customized link to report this fraud. But because it's a federal database, we only share the complainant initial and their borough. We do not put in the person's full name, full addresses or so. And if we got more complaint about bad actors, sometimes we have seen trends like from the same person being reported several times in our office. So we want to make sure that we flag that to the New York State Attorney General office. So we do report the fraud to them and we upload it to their database as well. And the last part is that sometimes we do receive news that like a law enforcement officer might reach out to us to let us know they are investigating a claim against a specific individual. And they want to know if you have received complaint from that person that we can share with them, even if the person or the scam did not happen in that specific DA county. But we do also ask for consent, and usually we share with them to help them with the investigation. Back to you, Liz.
Thank you. Can you move the next slide for me? If you still have control. Okay. So after we submit a complaint to law enforcement, we generally are no longer involved. So we don't always know what happens after a complaint is submitted. What we do know is sometimes law enforcement decides they don't move forward with investigation, or they are continuing to collect examples until the case is stronger. And so, you know, what we tell the callers is like, you may hear from somebody, but you may not, and this is the reason why. And that's not always that reassuring to people. We understand that, but we just want to be really honest so that people expect that. What's really challenging is that people's phone numbers change a lot or they move. And so sometimes they're sort of lost in the shuffle. But we do try to let people know it sometimes takes several complaints being filed over a course of years before enforcement takes action, right? So they can have enough evidence. And so we continue to encourage people to submit complaints, because at least eventually this may prevent others from being scammed. And, you know, the consequences if someone has been found to have committed fraud or a variety of different, violated a variety of different provisions, is that the consequences can range from court orders that prohibit their unlawful conduct. Sometimes they obtain restitution for the victims of the scams. It can include jail time as well if folks are violating court orders persistently, and certainly banning people from continuing to provide immigration services. Some people get their money back. It's rare and it can take years, and that doesn't help somebody that already just lost thousands and thousands of dollars. And also, if you are anonymous, it may be harder to be part of the restitution, but hopefully maybe you can come forward later when they do post information about a big award that was settled, for example. I'm not going to cover this provision because I realize our colleague is going to be talking about the UPL. And so just it is here so you understand that in 2015 there was a law enacted in New York, and we provided some of that context here. And so it's specific to immigration assistance services fraud, although there are other provisions that you could be charged with in this context, which we'll talk about in a moment. There's also New York judiciary law that really talks about how it's unlawful for any person to practice or appear as an attorney or hold themselves out in any other manner or assume the identity of an attorney, and in any language, right? And so this is where I think centers around the use of the word notario, which in some countries means you can be a lawyer, but here it does, you know, it's usually a notary public. And so that brings us to the common scams, right? You have government impersonators, people who are posing to either work for USCIS or other government agencies. Even we've heard of someone who was on a Zoom call with someone who was wearing robes as if they were an immigration judge and authorized them to get a work permit through a fake video hearing. And so we try to let people know that USCIS contacts you through official government channels. They don't send you messages on WhatsApp or through social media accounts such as Facebook or others. And so, you know, it's important to understand that that's happening so you can warn your own clients or community members. It's really scary times that people are doing that. I think also people are, as Jennifer mentioned, social media account offers definitely have increased. I mean, when you look at the statistics from the FTC, fraud on all levels has increased. You know, people are getting scammed in many different ways. But certainly we have gathered that there are more scams targeting temporary programs in particular because they're time sensitive. Job offer scams, for example, are also a common practice, as well as, you know, as Jennifer mentioned, making payments through these strange mechanisms for various fees. You know, there are procedures for how to do things, and if you're not familiar with the way that it's done, you don't realize that maybe this isn't the way to do it, especially when things look very official. So we're sharing these slides, which I understand, you know, maybe is a little bit small, but these are actual examples that were shared with us. And so if you look closely, is there anything about this that seems odd, you know, for those of you that are more familiar, right? Certainly a Gmail account, as we can see for this one thing, like just because it has a seal with a bird flying on it, or has the name of an actual agency, grant agent, you know, like there are terms used that, you know, are good at mimicking reality, but are not. And so it gets harder and harder to identify fraud. And that's why it's really important to share that information with each other and understand it. I think, you know, what's the new stuff is really frightening, especially the way the internet is being used to facilitate that, and people having harder time reaching in-person services. But also, you know, some old scams that I've seen for years are still happening, which is, you know, what some people call the 10-year visa. And I put it in quotes because that's not a thing. You cannot affirmatively apply for what's called the 10-year visa colloquially. It's really cancellation of removal, which is a defense to being removed for a very limited amount of people with a very high burden of proof. And that you have to do that before an immigration judge, and you can't just get in front of an immigration judge without having filed an application that was denied in most cases. And so what people scamming unsuspecting folks wanting to regulate their status, they're like, oh, do you have a sick child? You can apply for the 10-year green card if you've been here and paying taxes. And, you know, you hear about that from tax preparers, but you also hear lawyers doing it too. And unfortunately, it's usually handled by filing an application for asylum that they know is not going to meet the burden. The person has not been persecuted or has a fear of persecution if they return, but they might have a child who's here who is sick or has another family member, a qualifying family member that would suffer extreme and unusual, exceptional hardship. It's like a very, very high standard. There is a comic I've linked to in the resources that actually can explain this scam with like sort of more it's in language that is a little more accessible sometimes, that is more clear. It's not like lawyers talking about the legal standards. It's like, you know, how it would really present in a lot of cases. So that brings me to a game of fraud or not, and sort of to understand there's like a wheel of the types of situations that may or may not be fraud. So you could meet someone at a church or a place that says, oh, you're probably eligible for TPS, you're from this country, and they're going to help you file something for free. And it turns out you actually weren't eligible. You got here after the date that you needed to be here, and then the government rejected your application. So people call us and tell us about that situation. That's a mistake. It maybe is unlawful practice, but it's not fraud per se. They're not trying to scam you. You didn't pay any money. So that's sort of not great. You know, this is an example of even free help can hurt if it's done by someone who's not keeping up to date on the laws and the changes, or, you know, and is just sort of thinking that they're doing a good thing by helping you prepare applications, but not really doing what they should. To moving towards, you're going to a clinic, you're getting pro se application assistance, you need a work permit, and then you meet someone and they're going to help you get a work permit for a small fee of like $200 or $400. And that starts to move into a different area, right? It moves into unlawful practice of law, which again, I don't want to get into in details. So those are different situations that could be a claim. Here, a lot of times those, you know, might work. People get their claims approved, and so they don't think of it as fraud until people are denied. And so you have this mix of people who are getting the benefits that they're seeking and maybe are qualified to get them, and people who are not. You might see someone on Facebook, your family member is detained and they're saying they know someone from the government that can help, and you send them money through Zelle, but then you can't reach them. Now we're definitely getting into a clear-cut area of fraud from someone who's not an attorney, not a government entity, who's scamming you. But then you also have lawyers that are allowed to practice law, who say they're going to help you get a green card, but then they have papers that are created and they're with false statements that are alleging things that are not true. And these are real examples that we've seen. And that has a lot of repercussions. It erodes the benefits for people who actually legitimately should and qualify for VAWA. And then you might have a lawyer who you paid thousands of dollars to, and they did their best and they actually fought as hard as they could for you, but your case was denied, for 100 different reasons that maybe is not fraud. And so there are people who call in who are unhappy with the result and are, frustrated that they didn't win, and that's not always the case. So there is a whole wheel of things that are fraud and are not fraud. And so sometimes that might be the reason why someone might submit a claim and it turns out that it isn't fraud and they may not qualify for restitution, or it may not actually lead to prosecution in some cases. A lot of those examples that I just mentioned are listed here, and these go back to when I first started practicing law and went to a law clinic at the city bar with a man named Victor Espinal, who pretended to be a lawyer for 15 years. He did end up getting a 6-month jail term. And what I remember so vividly about that experience is that I actually went to volunteer at the detention center in New Jersey, and I met a man in an orange jumpsuit who lived in Washington Heights, who had a US citizen wife and a US citizen child, and he was helped by Victor Espinal, and he was in chains in prison and still called him a good guy who helped a lot of people in his community. And I think it's really telling that even in that situation, this is someone who was not willing to really recognize that that person defrauded him and put him in harm. And maybe if he had talked to somebody who actually knew what they were doing or filed their case appropriately, would have handled that situation better. And so, if people make mistakes, there are mechanisms to to file cases against them. And sometimes when a lawyer makes mistakes or does so in a scheme to defraud, right? Because the other example that is recent right now is with an attorney in the Bronx who used both non-lawyers and lawyers. And, right now they got millions of dollars in restitution. So certainly, we shared those links so that if you have clients that were defrauded by Kofi in the Bronx, or some other cases that are current, you can share that maybe they have an opportunity now to get some of that money back, or if they're willing to come forward at this stage with the AG's office. So we've shared resources that show examples of cases, as well as where you can get the list of the types of fraud that are there. This changes all the time. And where you can file a disciplinary for attorney discipline. There are examples of how to discipline somebody, or why a lawyer might be disciplined, I should say. And so these are the standards that lawyers need to be held to, or the DOJ accredited reps that Barbara is about to talk to you about. And so, you need to maintain communication with a client. You need to diligence and promptness and show up for the hearings that you say you're going to show up for. It's harder in a limited scope setting to understand that, but that's why you should be getting written documents that tell you what the expectations are. And so if someone does not, are ineffective in terms of they're committing malpractice, they don't do a good job, you may be able to open the case in some situations if you are working with a bad lawyer. And so that gives people another chance to file their case if you go to another lawyer that is competent. So we wanted you to know that that's maybe something that people don't realize. But one of the requirements, sorry, I'm going to go back to that, is that you maybe need to file a complaint that the first person did a bad job. And so that's to deter baseless accusations. And so reporting fraud allows you to move forward with that. And so if you want to get up to date information about scams, in addition to what we've talked about today, We've made a list of bar associations as well as DA's offices that share information. The FTC website is a National Consumer Protection Agency, and they have a complaint website, but because that is a federal agency, as well as the US Citizenship Services also has one as well, we tend to do that more anonymously for reasons that I think are very clear to most people here today. So if you want to help report fraud, we've shared our phone number. If you are a provider, it's really important to share a roadmap and be clear about how you may communicate with clients, how you won't. If you're talking to someone who's not eligible for relief, I think of it like if someone gave me a diagnosis of like terminal cancer, I'd want to get a second opinion. And so anybody that's told there's no path for you right now might go talk to someone else. So it's important for you as someone at an agency who's telling people to also warn them about scams and share tips. For example, you can, and we'll share that list in 1 second with you, but also to report a scam on someone's behalf with their permission. If they're afraid to come forward themselves, you can report on someone else's behalf and manage expectations. A lot of these procedures take a long time, and so people are anxious to either get help or file something, and maybe waiting 6 months to get help from a legitimate place is preferable to filing something now that is only going to put you in harm's way. So we shared some tips. I think a lot of you maybe know them, but it's really important not to sign a blank form and ask for copies. And if you pay for things, to get written receipts, that's proof if you ever are defrauded, that is going to be helpful to the prosecution, right? And so tip sheets are available in a lot of those different links as well as here. And so I do hope that all of these resources are helpful to all of you. And I'll be here for questions, and so will Geneva. So we'll turn it over now to Barbara to continue speaking.
Thank you so much. Just making sure that I can switch the slides. There we go. Perfect. Thank you so much. So as it was announced, I will be talking about the unauthorized practice of law a little bit more in detail. A couple of words about me. You can find my bio in the email that you received, but my name is pronounced as Barbara with the stress on the second syllable. I am the Director of Statewide Service Coordination with the New York Immigration Coalition. My educational background is mostly in political science and international relations, but I also am a language nerd, and I have a master's in linguistics and translation. But most importantly for this presentation, I am not a lawyer. I cannot give anyone legal advice. And also all the information that I provide is for educational purposes only. Moving on. So I wrote up a small scenario for everyone. And if you are able to type, I would like you to say if you or maybe your staff have found yourself in a similar situation like that. So we have a caseworker, Diana, who recently won her asylum case. And she has a resource fair, and she meets a community member, Ahmed. Ahmed's TPS status is expiring soon, and he's asking Diana if she thinks it is a good idea for him to apply for asylum to make sure that he can stay in the United States with his family. And if he can do that, how he can do that. Diana says that Ahmed's one-year filing deadline is next week. She knows that the asylum process has to be started before this deadline, and she knows the process very well. But the question is how she can help Ahmed and whether she can help Ahmed. So we're not answering the question just yet, but I just wanted to see if you can type in the chat whether or not you yourself or somebody from your colleagues have found yourself in a situation where you're asked for legal question and you are not sure whether you are supposed to answer it or not. And today's goals for today's presentation, we will learn what the unauthorized practice of law is. We will understand when and how how the staff may encounter the UPL. And we will also talk about some tips and strategies on navigating the challenges of assisting immigrant communities without engaging in UPL. So we'll start with what is the unauthorized practice of law. It is the answer to that might not be very straightforward. So in New York, we have New York Rules of Professional Responsibility for Lawyers, and Rule 5.5 is saying that lawyers shall not practice law in a jurisdiction in violation of regulation of the legal profession in that jurisdiction, and that a lawyer shall not aid a non-lawyer in the unauthorized practice of law. But these rules don't really explain to us what the unauthorized practice of law is. So we'll have to look further, and some of the provisions were already mentioned in the previous presentation, but there is also so the New York education law that says that anyone who is not authorized to practice a profession that requires licensing, so it doesn't necessarily apply only to lawyers, but also to other professions that require specialized licensing. So the ones who practice, offer to practice, or hold himself as being able to practice in any profession in which a license is a prerequisite to practice of the acts, is committing a crime. And this is a Class E felony, which means that it is punishable by a sentence 1 to 4 years. So it is important to say that historically we haven't seen a lot of enforcement of this law. However, it is very good to know what an authorized practice of law is in terms of immigration, legal help, and how to make sure that you protect yourself and your staff, especially in very dynamic times like we are having right now, where a lot is changing and we do not know whether we might see more enforcement of certain rules, including this one. So who can practice law? Admitted attorneys, so those who passed the bar exam, submitted their application to the board and have been sworn in as an attorney can practice law. Law students and recent law graduates can practice law under the supervision of an attorney. And then DOJ accredited representatives under certain circumstances can practice law. And we'll talk a bit about the DOJ accredited representatives right now. Has any of you heard the term DOJ accredited representatives, or maybe one of you is a DOJ accredited rep? If you can write that in the chat, that would be helpful for me also to kind of understand if maybe somebody is not familiar, so I can talk a little bit more about that. But in a nutshell, DOJ Recognition and Accreditation Program is a program that allows certain non-lawyers to represent clients before federal immigration agencies under certain circumstances. And recognition and accreditations are certifications that are offered through the Department of Justice, and they are administered by the Office of Legal Access Programs, or OLAP. And there are really two parts of this program. One is recognition. It is when OLAP grants a nonprofit organization the permission to practice immigration law. And the other one is accreditation, right? So this is when OLAP grants specific staff, members or volunteers of a recognized organization the permission to practice immigration law on that organization's behalf. So first an org has to be recognized, and then its staff can get the accreditation to practice law. There are some requirements to that, of course, and in fact, New York Immigration Coalition is helping organizations and the staffs of the community-based organizations to become recognized and their staff to become accredited. So we are holding also a regular information sessions on this topic. So if you are interested to learn more about that, I'm dropping a link. You can see when our next information session is, and sign up. And we also have some basic information on our website about the DOJ accredited representatives. Okay, I'm seeing that there are a bunch of DOJ accredited reps, which is amazing. Okay, so moving on, why do we have a UPL? So why do this rule exist about the unauthorized practice of law? The general idea, of course, is, and I mean, it is very, now it's probably easier to explain after the presentation that we just had about fraud and all the things that are happening, but the general idea is, of course, to protect community, right? It is to limit the practice of law to the members of bar who know what they're doing, and it protects the general public against rendition of legal services by unqualified persons. And making sure that the legal advice is well informed, right? And as it was mentioned, even the practicing immigration attorneys who are active, they still have to constantly get updates and information about all of the developments that are happening in immigration law, which are happening all the time. They might be minor, they might be major, but immigration law is very dynamic, and that's why it is crucial that a person who gives legal advice kind of knows all the complexities of this law, and in order to be able to give the best advice. The flip side of this, of course, is that it limits the community members' access to legal help, right? And that sometimes we want to help people, but we cannot help people because we are not lawyers, right? Even if we might know some of the information or some pieces of the information that might be helpful. So that is why it is very important to understand how we can help our communities without engaging into unauthorized practice of law. So before we go, what is the practice of law? The fun thing is there is no uniform definition of what that means, and it also varies by jurisdiction, by the state. And New York does not have a one uniform definition that we can reference, and that is why I'll give you a list of examples of things that definitely constitute the practice of law. So representing someone in immigration court, telling someone if they are or not eligible for an immigration benefit, for example, if they can apply for a TPS, if they can apply for asylum, telling someone which immigration form to file, helping someone to respond to substantive question on an immigration form that can be, for example, or should I include I committed a minor crime in my country. Should I include this? Should I disclose this information in my asylum application? Or should I include my children who are not with me, but they are in my home country into this application? So all of these substantive questions is something that only a lawyer can answer. Advising someone to disclose or not disclose something on an immigration form. So basically helping somebody to fill out the form and advise them on how to fill it out is something that constitutes practice of law. Usually at this stage, at this slide, I have a lot of folks in the audience who are like, oh, I might have crossed the line at some point. I might have said something that falls under this category. So you're not alone. A lot of people are not aware about where the lines lie. So that's why it is important, for you to very clearly understand where what you can and cannot do. So what is not a UPL? And this is also includes the information. So what we can actually do if we are not DOJ accredited reps, attorneys, or under supervision of an attorney. So we can direct someone to existing resources. And this is our number one tool in the toolbox on how to help somebody. So while I cannot tell somebody how to apply for asylum, I can find a resource that was written by a lawyer or that was proofread by a lawyer and read it together with a community member, translate it, explain something that is, if something is not understanding, if the community member is not understanding something in terms of language. So this will not be considered a UPL, right? When I get the existing checklist or existing material or an information from a government website and read it together with the community member or direct them to read it themselves. So this would not be an authorized practice of law. Know your rights style training. Again, in all of our Know Your Rights, it is recommended that Know Your Rights presentations are reviewed by lawyers. It is the best practice. But Know Your Rights type of presentation informs about people's rights, so it's educational. And that's why also all of our Know Your Rights trainings are usually starting with the presenter, if they are not a lawyer or a DOJ, saying very clearly, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a DOJ. Because remember, one of the kind of rules of that constitute a crime is making others think that you are not a lawyer. And sometimes by us speaking about the legal matters, make people think that we are lawyers and we are able to help. So if you're not a lawyer, you should really very clearly at the beginning of the conversation, if you are about to engage into conversations about legal matters, state it very, very clearly. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not qualified to give you any legal advice. And for any case-specific questions, you should be consulting a lawyer. And I am not able, it is forbidden for me, it is a crime for me to answer any case-specific questions. So be very direct and very transparent with community members, because obviously you will be asked a lot of questions, especially after Know Your Rights. We get it all the time about like some case-specific things that we are not able to answer. So it is very important to be consistent in your reply that this is not something I can help you with. Referring somebody to an attorney or providing a list of referrals. This is also something that we can and should do if we have a list of lawyers or local organizations. It is not a UPL to refer people to an attorney or to where to find help. Any work by a professional that has been delegated by a lawyer. So, for example, if a DOJ accredited rep is completing a form with a client, this is not considered a UPL, right? Because they are authorized. And then providing translation and interpretation services. So this is in practice sometimes gets a little bit murky because just interpretation and translation is not by itself a UPL, but it can become one should an interpreter start adding the information on their own. It's like, oh no, I understand their case, I'll just explain it, right? So as soon as if the interpreter starts kind of adding the information on behalf of the client, this would be considered a UPL. If it is a pure interpretation, it will not be considered a UPL. So again, just to resume, what is in our power as people who are not attorneys or DOJ accredited reps is to make sure that you always have on hand good resources, and there are plenty of them online that are written by the lawyers. There are the whole organizations that's mission it is to put out online the very digestible, multilingual information about different immigration processes. And so not to take this responsibility of the possibility to engage to UPL, it's always a good idea to just have these resources at hand and use them as a resource to inform your clients, right? And if you have a lawyer on staff, it's also good for any materials that touch upon immigration to go through a legal review by your legal team or a lawyer that you might have on staff, so that you can then start using these resources to work with your clients. And if we still have a moment, I don't know, Jenny, if we are still good on timing.
We're still good. I would say keep going.
Okay. So I just wanted to come back to my little scenario and maybe brainstorm with you a little bit now that we have heard everything that might be a UPL, might not be UPL. So in this situation, what can Diana do, or what what would be a UPL for Diana to do. So if you can just like throw in some things in the chat, that would be helpful for us to kind of have a little discussion and make sure that we are sharing the understanding of the material. I'll give it a moment because I know that sometimes it takes some time to type in things.
There were some comments Barbara originally put in the chat, so I just put them in the chat once more.
Okay. Refer him to an attorney or organization that provides immigration services for a consultation about this specific case. Yes, that is a good strategy to go about that. Can help him to find pro bono lawyers. Yes, so this would be the most straightforward way to go around it, right? To say, no, I cannot help you because I'm not a lawyer, and providing any information on your matter would constitute legal advice, and I am not authorized to do so. Here is a list of lawyers where you can get some information, where you can get some help. But what if Diana is in the region where there is just no legal service providers, or like no organizations who can help? Is there a list of trusted NGOs that can get clients be referred to? Yes, so this is always a good idea to have a list of places to refer people to when they ask such questions. Yes. Is there anything else? So apart from referring them to attorney, that is definitely a very good advice. But are there any other ways to help Ahmed without engaging in unauthorized practice of law? In addition, let's say, in addition to referring them to an attorney. Yes, sharing USS, there we go. Website address with info on asylum. Yes, so that would be definitely, if I were to encounter this information, this client, I would, yes, I would provide also resources, not only where to seek help, like attorneys, right, or NGOs, but also the informational resources, right? A page online that is written by the lawyers in the respective language that Ahmed can understand, that was written and reviewed by lawyers, that explains what asylum is and kind of what rules of asylum are. And Diana, in fact, could sit together with Ahmed and read through those resources together with him. And in this case, she will still be explaining basically what asylum is, but she will be reading through the resource that was created by lawyers. And as such, this is her safety to not be engaging in a UPL, right? So she will be within law, but still can help pretty much immediately to Ahmed to understand the process of asylum a little bit more, right? So that is why we always recommend to have those resources handy and available, right? For your caseworkers, for your staff, knowing how to navigate to government website and where to find information on different immigration reliefs might be very, very helpful. And again, as I mentioned, there are a lot of wonderful websites like ASAP, that Asylum Seeker Help Center, that puts out a lot of resources that are written in very comprehensive language that can help community members to understand different complex immigration processes And often it is a good idea to have those resources, just because, again, the reality of the fact is that legal help is available in some regions of the state, but not in others. And sometimes, unfortunately, the only help that community members can have in the regions where we don't have legal service providers is self-help materials, right? Is the materials that explain all the processes to them. Again, we cannot help them make any decisions, but we can help them navigate to the information that might be helpful for community members to seek knowledge about the immigration. So thank you. Thank you so much. I think that the copy of the slides will be shared. And just to conclude, my contact information will be on the slides. You should, I think, receive them. So if you have any further questions, do let me know. And also, if you're interested in our DOJ program, do reach out to NYC as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, so for our next presenter, we have Belia from our Division of Consumer Protection. So Belia, take it away.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Belia Jimenez, and I'm with the Division of Consumer Protection. Thank you for having me. The Division of Consumer Protection is, our mission is, think of us as the equivalent to the the state equivalent to the Federal Trade Commission. Our mission is to protect consumers from economic harm, and our role is to help consumers protect consumers from unfair, deceptive, or fraudulent practices through education, mediation. We also enforce the do not call law, and by advocating for a fair marketplace. So we have multiple areas within our division, each specializing in an aspect of the consumer marketplace to serve New Yorkers. But before we go more into our resources, I wanted to talk briefly about resources for reporting fraud. Can we go to the next slide? I can't drive the slide. It's not letting me drive the slide. Brian, can we go to the next slide? I see. Okay. Thank you. So, so we talked about the importance of reporting a scam. We heard throughout our presentation today, and we've seen examples that scammers they're very crafty. They're evolving rapidly. You know, they're really exploiting emerging technologies, changes in laws, and shifting trends to create more sophisticated schemes. They're always adapting and finding new ways to deceive and exploit people. So that's why it's so important, and we can't stress this enough, that it's so important to report the scams. There's several benefits in reporting a scam. The first is it protects others by raising awareness of these ever-evolving scams and providing details about the scams. It helps us keep New Yorkers informed. And it also helps law enforcement with information so they can investigate and you know, it helps them build a case against these scammers. So there's definitely some benefits in reporting the scams. And there are two places where you can report a scam, and you can submit an anonymous report, and you can provide as much or as little information as you feel comfortable in providing. And the first place you can report a scam is in the Federal Trade Commission. It's the most robust database of fraud reports that exist on a national level. For context, last year alone in 2024, they received a total of 2.6 million complaints last year. And this information is available to federal, state, and local law enforcement across the country. So the FTC, they use these reports to investigate and bring cases against fraud, scams, and bad business practice. Just a note that they can't resolve any specific complaints on behalf of individuals, but the information that's provided really helps build a case against these scammers. And the next place where you can report a scam is with the FBI Internet Crime Complaint Center. And the way this differs from the Federal Trade Commission is this one is mostly focused on cyber crimes. So the cyber crimes really encompasses a wide range of online criminal activities. It could be anything from phishing, identity theft, online scams, or cyber stalking. So very important that scams are reported to these entities. So moving on, want to talk briefly about the resources that the New York State Division of Consumer offers and how we can help you. We operate the state's identity theft prevention and mitigation program, and we do that in two ways. We focus heavily on education and prevention. We do prevention through education. We do a lot of in-person workshops, webinars, lunch and learns, where we do a lot of tabling events. We also educate through our digital channels, either through consumer alerts, our social media platforms. So we try to really educate New Yorkers about their rights, any new scams that are out there, and really help New Yorkers make informed decisions and about in the marketplace. And we extend our educational resources to all New Yorkers. We have teams in upstate New York as well as the downstate region, so we're available. We're here to, and available, and we'll provide some information on how you can submit a request for an in-person presentation or a webinar at the end of the slide, but we are available for this to do in-person presentations. Another way that we also are available that we do, we operate the identity theft prevention mitigation is we have a hotline, a consumer assistance hotline, and they serve as neutral mediators. They help in the event that someone is a victim of identity theft. We're there to answer any questions and help them through the process. We're also there to guide them through any other any concerns that they may have. We're neutral mediators, and we're a resource for all New Yorkers. We help consumers resolve disputes with businesses through voluntary negotiation. In last year alone, we received almost 30,000 complaints from across the state. So we have, we're there Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 4:30, and our operators are there live. So in addition, so I mentioned we operate the state's identity theft prevention and mitigation program, but we also have a series of presentations, of standard presentations that we regularly update to reflect current trends and policies. And one of them that we have is one that's focused on immigration scams. And we have conducted these presentations throughout the state. And it really focuses on providing an overview of some of the most common scams that target the immigrants and new Americans. We focus on real examples, and we provide tips on how to prevent them. And so we do a series of these presentations throughout the year. So we're available if anyone is interested in learning more. We'd be happy to review and provide these presentations in person. Another presentation that we also offer is preventing and responding to identity theft. And it's a very popular one. It's designed to educate and empower New Yorkers, really to help them understand the importance of protecting their personal information, learn the impact of identity theft, the warning signs, and how to prevent it. It also explains ways to reduce the chances of becoming a victim and what are some of the quick action steps that they can do to minimize damage. And in the event in which we hope that they do become a victim of identity theft, we can definitely guide them through that process and what they can do. Another core presentation, these are our more popular presentations because we feel that education is so important and so valuable now more than ever. Many of the scams are conducted online. The reason why there's more scams that we find is because of there's so much, there's the emerging technologies, there's AI, there's, you know, we have everything we do is online now. So all our information is online. So we have a dedicated presentation focused on online safety. And really what we do is we focus on educating the public on understanding the importance of data privacy. And as new digital technologies are introduced, you know, this presents an ever-evolving set of online data protection and privacy challenges for consumers. So we, you know, this presentation really provides strategies and tips so they can safely navigate the digital world and understand why it's so important to, you know, to limit your digital footprint. So I mentioned scam prevention, identity theft prevention, and online safety. Those three presentations are three of our core presentations, and collectively, we don't really duplicate a lot of information between the three, but when you present the three of them in a series, they're very, you know, they're very enlightening. It helps consumers really kind of get a more understanding of how they can prevent scams. And then lastly, we also do have a presentation on credit management. And this as you know, many of us are transacting and banking online. So this is a very, very important topic. But it also provides practical tips on managing credit cards, improving credit scores, and smart credit card use. Really essential knowledge for anyone who's looking to take control of their financial future. So in addition to the presentations that I shared, we wanted to add that these presentations we do in any language, and we can tailor it to the audience that we're presenting to. So that's something that that our team definitely does. We also have resources. We have brochures that we develop and distribute, really to enhance the learning of our consumer education topics. For example, this year we introduced for the first time a 2025 calendar featuring 12 consumer protection topics for every month. So there, you know, it has topical information, and we're going to continue doing that next year. So if you're interested in receiving those calendars next year please let us know. We'd be happy to send some of those materials. And we have a presence on social media. We're in Facebook and on X, and we generally share tips on how to prevent scams in our social media platform. So please follow us. And this is our website link as well. We're part of the Department of State. And if you're interested in requesting a presentation, please submit a request for education and outreach to our email. You can do so online, or you can call us. You can request for a DCP representative to speak at an event, or to partner with us at an outreach event. So in the screen, you'll see our outreach, our email address and our phone number where you can reach us. So with that, and then lastly, just want to give you the number to our hotline. As I mentioned earlier, they're live operators that are there to answer any questions. This is the number where you can reach them. They're live from 8:30 to 4:30 p.m. every single day, excluding state holidays. With that, thank you so much. This concludes my section on resources, and I'm available to answer any questions.
That being said, let's get into some questions. Everyone, you can either raise your hands or you can ask the questions in the chat. I see someone in the attendees have their hand. Roberto, do you want to I'm requesting to unmute. Roberto? Okay. Dax, can you please repeat the DC Teach email again? Okay, so we're gonna also acknowledge some of the questions that was submitted through registration. So the first one was, what are some of the most common scams or fraudulent practices you encounter? Anyone's free to open to answer that from the panelists.
Happy to answer that. I mean, we did answer a lot of the questions that were submitted previously during the presentation, so we can go back to that slide, but the most common scams, I would say, are the people for us in immigration, folks that say they're going to prepare documents for you and then disappear and maybe eventually can't be found, I would say, are the most common, or people that think things were going to be prepared for them that are not submitted. I don't know if there's other examples that people wanted to share, but that would be the one that I think we see the most on our hotline.
A lot of questions. How about referrals for victims who have been traumatized to mental health professionals on our hotline?
So I'm not sure that being scammed, like, certainly if someone is expressing that they are having mental health, issues, then we have services that we recommend people go to. But, I don't know if they're like when they're working with law enforcement, if there's victim services in those situations, I can't really speak to that, but certainly, I don't know if there's like a lot of separate resources specifically for this particular population. But anyone that does have a claim for VAWA, for asylum, for U visas, if they're working for nonprofits, a lot of nonprofits do have access to those. So when we make referrals on the ONA hotline, we would recommend places that have, holistic service provision.
I'm not sure if this was answered during the presentation, but how should someone report fraud if their landlord is the offender and using court eviction to coerce them into divergent personal identification, and where can they seek help?
Brian, they can call our hotline and we can guide them through resources. We can guide them through the right state agency.
What can you do if your lawyer frees an eviction, allowing the other parties to take all your possessions, including your tax return, despite the petitioner having a criminal record? Represented. Okay, so we have, does the New York Immigration Coalition have a list of reputable NGOs to refer clients who need legal services? Fortunately, Ra left. She had a lot of meeting to go to, but I can refer that question to her via email and send it out when we send the recordings and the PDF of the power slides to everyone who attended the webinar. Alrighty. So with that being said, big thank you to our amazing presenters. Thank you for taking some time to provide insight and your teamwork to awareness for immigration fraud. It's truly appreciated. To all the attendees, we love your feedback. Please take a moment to fill out our short exit surveys. And we will share the recordings and slide with everyone soon. Everyone stay safe and healthy, and everyone have a great rest of their day. And feel free to contact us if you have any additional questions. Bye, everyone.